Now drawing is already rested. I let it sit for a couple of minutes so that the ink would dry. And I want to start with the shading. So I'll start with the warm gray and cool gray 2. And basically, the initial idea is just to shade top to bottom where the light will not hit. Now I'm doing this with a very light touch so that the shading is not like extra dark. I just want it to have like the value block out there. And then I think about a circular shape there where the light would stop hitting. And I just throw the shade there. And you can see I already made a mistake because I shaded the top of the wing there, but that's fine. When we add the darker values, that will kind of not show. And you can always think that that's dirt or whatever. For the engine, what I'll actually do, I'll shade that with I'll block that out with the full gray so that it's a full on darker shape. Because then you can notice that it's a different material. Then I'll do a similar thing with the pilot over here. I'll block that out as a different shape. And what I want you to notice on the cockpit especially is that I'll leave some areas, even though they are supposed to be shaded, I'll leave them blank because I want to create this sort of effect of reflection right around here. So yeah, I don't want to cover the white area there. And then, as I mentioned on the materials video, on the pens video, I'm already adding some of that reflective look here because I have the pen in my hand already. So the way that you do that is take the edge and then you leave a little white space there, but you also add a darker edge close to it. Then it will look like a reflective material. And same thing for the wing here. I want to add the darker reflection around here and around all of these edges that in theory they are all pointing upwards, but the idea behind these darker shapes is just that they are reflecting a darker area of the sky. So maybe there's a cloud or they're just reflecting the top of the sky dome, which would be darker. And then I can continue the shading of the rest of them. So basically the way that you need to look at this is anything that I'm putting a warmer tone on, that is just full on shadows. And then anything that I'm putting a blue tone on, except for the engine, that's a mix between reflection and material value. Yeah. Now I know my hand is getting in the way, but I just need to get those shapes correctly. Then on the engine here, I will darken the cool gray with some warm tones to show that that's the shadow. And then like casting some shadow as well there. Now I'll come in with the darker values. So it's basically the same thing, just darker. I'll grab the warm gray value 4 and the cool gray value 4 as well. And these tones are a lot darker, So I want to take them slowly so that I don't mess up the drawing. But what I'll do is a similar deal that I was doing with the full gray, where the warm gray, the darker warm gray will be a mix of shading and reflections. And once I do the shading there, I also smooth it out with the warm gray too, so that it looks as if the value is flowing through the shade. So you notice like you just put the value here, right? And then you come in with a different marker and blend it. Now I know that Copic sells a actual blender marker or something similar to that, but I never used that, and I don't know if I ever will. But yeah, the idea is that you don't need to do how I'm doing it. You can do it in a different way. I don't know if it's worthwhile or not. Like I never used it, so yeah, do what you want. If you want to try that out, go for it. And also at this time, as I mentioned in the previous one, I also want to add like very thin uh, weathering lines. And you can see that at this point, because the marker is super wet, and the previous marker pad is also super wet, the paper is starting to kind of like soaking in. So if I barely touch the page, the marker already bleeds through. So that's when you need to be careful and just think about like what you're doing and not rush the process. Now on the wing, same deal. Doing a bit of a darker line close to the edge that will be more reflective. And the reflection lines, they will not be super smooth or super smoothed out. Like I'll not blend them quite as much. And then let me add like darker values around here as well. So that like this portion is also hitting the shading there. Now to the cool grays. Same deal with the cool grays. Getting the C4 now. And on the engine, what I'll do is I'll mix the shading with some ambient occlusion and some drop shadow from the body of the ship itself. So all of this top area, just like one block of drop shadow, then you can barely see that. And as I mentioned before, like on the whole scheme of the drawing, this just looks like a value block, which makes the details less important themselves. And here is the area where things are lighter. So because the light's kind of like spreading through, and you are the way that the glass works, it's will have a darker portion, kind of like where it's looking directly at us, because that means that it's reflecting less of the environment. And then as I move towards the back on the other side, and as I move downwards, it will be less dark. So what I want to do with the marker is just create the illusion of that gradient. So I want to come in like from back to front, like fading that line, and then do a similar thing here. And then I take the lighter cool gray and just blend that through. still leaving that untouched area down in the center. Then you can do the a similar thing with the weathering here. Here we are approaching the finishing touches. Same deal with the reflections. We just add a little bit of a darker tone there. Doesn't need to be super crisp. It can be like wobbly. If you make it super crisp, the surface will look smoother. So if you're sketching something that is extremely streamlined and everything, you do that. If you're doing something that is kind of like older looking, more beat up, you can do it like I'm doing here. And the whole reason why I'm doing this way is because I added some rivets on the fuselage, so that gives this a older look already. So I thought like I might as well just take advantage of that and yeah, and just go for it. Now I'm using a pen that I didn't mention, which is just a Tombow brush pen, and this will be the finishing touches of adding super dark shades, so full on black, and I'll add it mainly to the engine bay, so we have like some dark shadows there, and this will kill some of that noisy detail. So it's kind of weird, like when you're thinking about it, that it will kill detail that you already drew in, but just helps to read that shape. Uh, where I got a lot of the reasoning behind this, like I learned how to do this kind of hatching and everything, is from comic book artists because they're basically masters at doing this sort of thing. And then you can kind of, at this point, it's more of a illustration than a design sketch because you are just adding finishing touches and kind of like hatching and yeah, basically having fun. The design challenge is kind of over at this point, and you're just making a cool illustration. Um, what I want to do as well is sketch a shadow underneath. Now I don't always do the shadow with the super black dark shadow there, but for this one I thought it'd be fun because then instead of just showing the basic technique, you guys can come out of this with a nice illustration piece of it as well. Again, the shadow is not really like extra precise. It's just following the main shapes and good enough for a quick sketch. Now, depending on the kind of pen that you have, it'll be easier to fill this up, and you will not get like the super streaky lines that I'm getting. But that's again a combination of the type of paper that you're using with the type of pen that you're using and everything. So overall, no one bats an eye at it or even cares for it. So you can use whatever it is that you want. And in a moment, you'll see that I'll even change the pens that I'm using because it's these super big areas. They are hard to fill up with the small brush like this. So I will just draw it over. Let's see if it's wide enough. Actually, I think this is more of what we have here. And then on that side is like super down there. So I need to, yeah, sketch it like this. So it makes a little bit more sense. But now just to fill this area up, I'll actually bring I think this is the Pentel pocket brush. This is an extremely popular pen. And what I do is I do the outline first, just so I don't mess up when I'm going with the thicker lines. And you can see how much easier it is to fill this up with the larger brush, right? In a couple of minutes, this will be done. Now, this is just one of the many finishes that you can have for a drawing, for a sketch like this. Some people do which is quite nice as well, the sort of backdrop black shape that kind of makes it look as if it's in floating in space or flying through space, which is also super nice. Some artists that I admire a lot that do that are like Doug Shane or Dorian Wood. Basically, if you take the Nothing But Mac book and go through it, you'll find a lot of people that do this. And more guys that do traditional drawings that are also hard surface focused, like John Fry and Mikko Kuz. They all have tutorials and super cool pages to follow. So if you want to get more into this sort of content, I recommend following those guys as well, because this kind of drawing brings a super cool old school feeling. And although 3D and the new tools are super nice, I feel like what what this kind of illustration has that those mediums don't, it's the idea that a lot of the a lot of the value of this illustration, it's actually handed to the viewer, in a sense that they can fill up the gaps and they can kind of like imagine how this spaceship would look in real life. And we're not giving them everything, they're not getting everything handed to them, the viewer, I mean. So they can imagine a lot more stuff and they can play with it in their heads. And this is the a huge portion of the value. Yeah, just adding some streaky hatchet lines, but yeah, we are pretty much done. Now let's look at it closely. Okay, let me bring this close to the camera so you can see. Yeah, it's a nice illustration. I'll add a scan of it so you can look at it like on its every single detail if you're interested in that. But pretty much we have a cool product here. Okay, I'll see you on the next video.